Yes, and with me now is Professor Heinz Flessa of the Thünen Institute of Climate Smart Agriculture. Professor Flessa, welcome here. Maybe you can first explain to all of us what exactly carbon farming is and how it's used.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Well, carbon farming in agriculture describes all measures and actions to reduce greenhouse gas emission from agriculture. From agricultural land use, from land use changes induced by agriculture. And a second point is that it includes also measures that result in a long-term fixation of atmospheric carbon dioxide in organic matter of soils and vegetation of agricultural ecosystems. So both points, reduction of emission and long-term fixation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere contributes to climate protection.
So what are the key measures to achieve carbon neutral farming?
Well, emissions from agricultural ecosystems have many sources. Therefore, there's not a single measure. There are many different measures to reduce emission. You can focus on reduction of methane emission from livestock production, in particular cattle and cows. You can focus on methane emission reduction from paddy rice growing. If you are in regions where you have a high nutrient surplus, in particular nitrogen, you have to deal with high nitrous oxide emissions and the reduction of these emissions. And if you are in regions where you have land use changes driven by agriculture, you have to think about how you can stop these land use changes inducing high emissions of carbon dioxide.
Now, looking at the big picture, where do you see the most untapped potential?
Well, in general, we need regional and farm scale optimized mitigation measures. But looking at the bigger scale, we have some key points to make big steps forward in reduction of greenhouse gas emission. The first point is improvements in food production practices. So food has to be produced as resource efficient as possible with high yield and high yield security. With these different points I addressed during the last question. The second point is we have to adapt a diet in human nutrition rich in plant-based foods, and only I would say a moderate amounts of food from animals like meat, milk products and eggs. And the background is that protein production based on this animal production is much more inefficient with respect to greenhouse gas emission as compared to protein production by plant production vegetables. This point 2. Point 3 is we have to reduce food losses at a global scale. Models indicate that about 1/3 of the agricultural production is lost by losses during the production chain or by wasting food. And the next point is adopting a diet in human nutrition which is adapted to an optimized per capita caloric consumption, a healthy caloric consumption, because we have the problem that we have many countries and millions of people say eat too much. They have health problems because overeating. And on the other hand, we have 12% of our global population, they suffer from malnutrition. So we need to outbalance this problem. Yeah, these are the big points to make big steps forward in the reduction of greenhouse gas emission at a global scale. But do not forget, we need regional and farm scale optimized solutions.
Yeah, so you've just mapped out for us that people are consuming too much meat, too many animal products, too many dairy products. At the same time, we're wasting way too much food, both in the process, but also afterwards by simply throwing it away. Where are the main barriers right now to us getting better at this?
Yeah, there are barriers and challenges at different scales. First of all, as I told you, there is not a single reduction technique in agriculture. So agriculture is highly variable and emissions are based on microbial processes. So it's not so easy to reduce emissions under different production conditions. And there's not one technical solution. That's important. The second point is that we have a growing world population and we need an increasing amount of food for a growing number of people. That's really challenging. And doing this, we have to reduce emissions. The third barrier probably comes from natural limitations. If you look at the global agricultural area, about 70% is grassland. And normally grassland is used by producing cattle, ruminant animals that can use this grass and convert it to food. So it's not so easy on all regions to really change the whole system to another way of production. Then we have probably not enough economic incentives to reduce emissions, because emissions in agriculture, actually there's no price for these emissions. And there's no benefit for the farmer to reduce emissions. And we should not forget that billions of people say their economic development is based on agriculture. We have 75% of small farms around the world, and these smallholders, they really rely on agricultural production. So we have to keep in mind that all mitigation measures they have to support these small-scale farmers in their economic development. And in the end, we also have to keep in mind that it is not only a matter of reducing greenhouse gases. All these carbon farming initiatives and methods, they have to support the global sustainable development goals, like, for example, biodiversity, food security, economic development, as I told you.
You've addressed all those different levels also of farming, from subsistence farming to large-scale farming. And that, of course, raises the question, how much is this about techniques and know-how, and how much is it about policy?
It's both. It's both. So I think we need a concerted action, including activities from policy, from states, but also including companies, food companies in particular, and including farmers and consumers. So states, for example, they can set clear emission reduction targets for agriculture. They can restrict land use changes, and they can support the establishment of new environmental friendly and climate friendly techniques in agriculture, and can support education of farmers, but also consumers with respect to topics like climate smart farming or climate friendly nutrition, if you look at the consumers. The food companies, they can work on their own carbon footprint in their field and can set quality standards of production of agricultural products used in their food processing. And consumers, they should be aware of the impact of food consumption and food waste on environmental issues and also climate change. So I think we need a new definition of high quality food that includes environmental issues. So how is food produced and how is the environmental and climate impact?
So what are your key recommendations for states, but also for businesses to make this happen?
Yeah, I think climate protection should be a general focus in all states, in all businesses, and we have to reduce emissions and set incentives to reduce emissions at the farm scale at all levels. So more and more countries, they set their emission reduction targets for agriculture and have the development of action plans, how they will reach these emission reduction targets. But we also need development targets for agriculture, in particular in developing countries, to increase yield and improve yield stability. So it's a question of all levels, states, companies, consumers, but also farmers, which have in the end apply these climate-friendly techniques and ways to produce.
Now, markets work with incentives. What have proved to have been the most effective incentives so far?
I think there should be a price for climate-friendly management and production. And the most valuable incentive is, in the end, the price, if you are within markets. So we need a kind of setting a price for emissions and supporting a more climate-friendly, environmental-friendly kind of agricultural production.
So how much has COVID-19 changed the equation?
The equation is the same as before, I would say. But what we see, we have a general reduction of greenhouse gas emission in many sectors, but not in agriculture. I would say we are not more traveling around the world during the last 1.5 years. So we reduce our own carbon footprint, but I think what we eat is more or less the same as before. So the total emission from agriculture has not changed so much.
If you could get consumers to understand one aspect of your work fully, what would that be? I think it's important for the consumers that they know the carbon, more or less, qualitatively, the carbon footprint of what they eat. So we need a very clear and stringent information. What does it mean if I eat everyday meat? If I have everyday milk products? And what does it mean for climate? What does it mean for environment? What does it mean for resources which are used in agriculture? So as I told you, we need a new definition of food quality. So the way of production, also animal welfare has to be included, is an important point of food quality in my sense. Thank you very much. That means the responsibility is with each and every one of us. Thanks so much for your input, Professor Heinz Flessa of the Thünen Institute of Climate Smart Agriculture.
Thank you.